My hero, Bob Dvorchak, has done it all in journalism, and as he likes to call it, the backstory, he's lived it. And Pete Rose is someone that he knows all too well, what he did, Charlie Hustle, for the game of baseball. Word today, and you heard CBS Radio News leading off with it. The story tonight, as it will be for days to follow, all-time hit leader in Major League Baseball, Charlie Hustle, has passed away at the age of 83. Not to say I'm shocked, but I wish he could have hung around a little bit longer, long enough maybe to get into the Hall of Fame. Bob Dvorchak, good evening.
Good evening, Rob. Great to be here.
Talk about Pete Rose.
Well, it's sort of like a dichotomy, isn't it? You talk about Pete Rose, the baseball player, one of the greats of all time. The numbers are there, the accomplishments are there, but Pete got in trouble after he left the playing field, was a manager, and got in trouble for gambling, betting on his own team. So we have this checkered personality in front of us, one of the most revered and respected baseball players ever, and a man who stained the game by betting on it through bookies and then lying about it. However, this whole plot is a little thicker now because of the current situation with professional sports or any sports, that gambling is part of the game. Gamblers sponsor some of the broadcasts. It's quite a situation as far as sports goes.
This is why I have him here tonight. If you want to see him live and in living color, go to kdkradio.com and click on KDK Watch. Longtime Pirate beat writer, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette sports writer, and journalist Bob Dvorchak. As a baseball player, you know as well as I know, growing up in the 70s, it was the Pirates and it was the Big Red Machine. And I talked to John Parado earlier, Pittsburgh Baseball Now. In my lifetime, that group of talent that they had and Sparky Anderson led in the 70s, may be the best lineup ever in the history of baseball. He said the only comparison might be the 27 Yankees with Ruth and Gehrig and Fox, but let me tell you, that was a heck of a lineup, right?
Oh, they were good. Oh, I mean to tell you, from top to bottom, with Rose leading off, and Johnny Bench and George Foster in there, and it was just when they called it a machine, it really just did roll through everything. I remember those playoffs in the 70s with the Reds against the Phillies, and Phillies just didn't have a chance. One of the great all-time teams, and they won 2 titles, went to it 4 times. Probably that series with Boston that won 7 games is one of the all-time classics as far as the World Series goes. Yeah. Hey, and before I forget, Rob,
yes,
Pittsburgh has a big place in Pete Rose history. His first base hit. The first base hit he got off was off of Bob Friend of the Pirates in 63, I believe.
And he knew that before Google. My man, I love you.
Google called me to get that answer.
Well, here's the other thing, and I talked to John Parado about this, and you've educated me. Listen, fireside chats, everything I know in the world of sports is because I've been baptized by Bob Dvorchak. That the Galbraiths actually offered him some racehorses when he was looking for a place to play after Cincinnati. And isn't that ironic? Talk about a twist of fate, right? A little bit of gambling there, too.
Absolutely. And this was a free agency that just started to proliferate through Major League Baseball. Rose was leaving the Reds after that career. And I mean, he could command a salary. The Pirates were in the bidding with the Phillies for him, and John Galbraith, who owned the racing farm back there in Kentucky, did offer him some horse flesh if he would have come to Pittsburgh. Now, then again, you have that little complication. Horse racing is gambling, isn't it?
Listen, we all grew up playing Sandlot, and some of us made our names there, never had a chance to play organized sports for whatever reason, and I happen to fall in that category, but I have a love of sports. But why I love Pete Rose so much, he was the kid on the block, little slower, little smaller, and he just waited to get picked by anyone to play. From Cincinnati, grew up within miles of that ballpark, and he ends up playing for his hometown team and becomes maybe the most loved and greatest Cincinnati Red. And if you look at the all-time hits leader, I don't know how you could argue that. read of all time. That really is a fairy tale kind of story, isn't it?
Oh, he sure is. Yeah, and I think you described him perfectly too. He wasn't the svelte athlete, the cut athlete. He was a little stocky, looked like more like a linebacker or a free safety or something coming at you. But he could play. I don't know of any person who was wedded to a game more than Pete Rose. Pete Rose and baseball were one and the same. He lived for baseball. Baseball was his oxygen. Unfortunately, he ran afoul of some of the procedures that baseball had put into play because of scandals dating back to 1919.
I get frustrated over certain things, but I know it's life. We had the drug trials here in Pittsburgh, cocaine and some of our favorites of all time being managed by one of our own and favorites of all time. But what I loved about Pete Rose later in life, he talked about what they were eating in the way of the greenies, the speed, meaning that drug to kind of get a little extra edge with a whole lot of coffee back during the glory days of the Big Red Machine. One thing you can say about Pete Rose, he left nothing to chance, and if there was anyone who was willing to talk about it all, it was him. And it was his way of saying, look, I love baseball. I love everything about it. But, every era and everyone, even going back to those all-nighters with Babe Ruth, everybody has vices, Bob.
Well, yeah, we're all made of clay, aren't we? It's not a game of perfection played by perfectionists, and there are flawed human beings. But you asked Pete Rose a question, he would give you an answer. Pete wore his heart on his sleeve. He really did tell you what he was thinking and what his opinion was, and he didn't try to sugarcoat things or hide things. Yeah, there were issues in baseball that baseball people knew all about and did nothing until kind of like explodes in the media. That's another situation. But I do remember when Pete Rose received his lifetime ban, that was such a big deal.
It was.
Such a huge story. The all-time hits leader, Charlie Hustle, is now Charlie Hustler. And it just made headlines, still making headlines. But in 2004, he published a book in which he admitted that he did do the things that they accused him of doing and that he had lied about, but he made money from the book. One sad thing it's sad to me that he never made it to Cooperstown and never made it to the Hall of Fame. But he was up there. He was up there in the summers, and he'd pull up a table, and he'd sign autographs and sell his autographs like, for money, like an alky sells his blood to get more wine. It was tough to see.
So let me ask you, and I can hear that purist, that journalist in you, as I did Parado, and far be it from me to ever challenge either one of you. But if you had a vote, would you vote him in? And could he actually maybe go in posthumously? Do you think that's even in his future? But first, if you had a chance to be the deciding vote, what would it be? Yes or no?
In 1989, I'd have said no. I think I have to rethink that question right now, given the current environment. And I do think, and this is probably what's going to happen. Baseball will rethink its position after Pete's passing and let some time pass. And they may go back and revisit that whole situation. But don't forget, 3 separate commissioners have upheld his lifetime ban. So unless something happens on baseball's part, what anybody says about whether they would vote him in or not is moot. Because until baseball lifts that ban, there's no chance.
Will anybody ever break that all-time hits record?
Boy, I'll tell you, Rob, wouldn't it be tough to do? Like, hey, say you average 200 hits a year, and you had a nice career. You played 20 years, and every year you had 200 hits. You still only have 4,000 hits. You'd be 256 short. I mean, that is an incredible record. It really is. It's longevity and it's productivity year after year after year.
One more segment with the legend that is Bob Dvorchak. Any books coming out before we go to break? What are you working on?
Oh, you know what? I've been reorganizing some things here, and I've been catching up on my granddaughters and they're playing girls lacrosse and girls tennis, and I'm just enjoying that moment right now before I make any major decisions.
All right. Well, there's a screenplay in you somewhere. I'm telling you. There's a screenplay, and I want to be in that front row when it happens. We'll take a break. We'll come back. Bob Dvorchak talking Pete Rose and more next on KDK.